Who or what is the biggest threat to Airbus right now, and are they secretly about to release a real revolution? With Boeing in the situation that they are right now, you would think that Airbus would just be sitting back, relaxing and selling planes as fast as they can, but actually it turns out that they can't really do that, because both Airbus and Boeing have another looming crisis to think about, a crisis that won't be waiting for anyone. And that's why, behind closed doors, Airbus are actually working on a brand new aircraft right now. Stay tuned. Now, I have looked at Boeing's recent troubles in a series of videos over the last few weeks, and actually I've been releasing videos about Boeing and its 737 well before the MAX 9 blowout that happened in January. Obviously, in those videos, I have been looking closely at how these Boeing problems will also affect Airbus, and more generally, how these two industry giants compete with each other in this current environment. Now, in one of those recent videos, I focused on how Boeing and Airbus did financially in 2023 and where they find themselves today. But what I actually want to do with this video is to try to look at things from Airbus' point of view and how they are focusing on the future. Boeing today isn't really in a position where they can threaten Airbus in any plausible way, since Airbus has an order book that is both bigger and growing faster than Boeing's. Now, all that actually means is that the disparity between the two aviation giants could actually just grow larger over time, since Airbus could use their higher revenues to effectively outdevelop whatever Boeing does. And of course, that's if the American manufacturer actually decides to develop something new at all. But this doesn't mean that Airbus is completely free from troubles. They are at a much lower scale than Boeing's worries, obviously, but the European manufacturer still has plenty of headaches, and these primarily include aircraft delivery delays. Airbus delivered 735 aircraft in 2023, which beat their target of 720 deliveries and obviously eclipsed Boeing's 528. But in 2019, before the pandemic, Airbus delivered 863 aircraft. We actually have to go all the way back to 2017 to see deliveries similarly low as last year's were. So Airbus would like to get back to and obviously supersede those pre-pandemic numbers as soon as possible. But this might still take a couple of years to achieve. In fact, they have recently informed their customers to expect even more delays this year and way into 2025. This is mainly because of problems with their suppliers, who are struggling to ramp up those earlier production rates due to looming supply chain issues that just still doesn't go away. But more importantly for this video, these delivery issues should just reinforce what I was saying in the beginning. With Boeing struggling, Airbus has every reason to just concentrate on increasing their production and nothing else. Because they're actually in a situation right now where some airlines at least have started picking the 737 MAX over the Airbus A320neo only because the delivery slots for the Airbus jets are now literally years further down the line than the Boeing jets are. So this should logically be even more reasons for Airbus to just focus on boosting their production and avoid trying something risky like launching an all-new jet, for example. But the thing is that their large order book doesn't mean that Airbus can afford to become complacent. As Scott Hamilton in Leham News pointed out a few months ago, if they're not careful, Airbus could easily make some of the same strategic mistakes that has gotten Boeing into the situation that they are today. You see, the love that Boeing management have shown for financial indications like free cash flow, stock buybacks and general focus on shareholder values are not unique to the American manufacturer. Airbus also does stock buybacks, and some of its organizational changes seem to mirror Boeing's in a lot of different ways. For example, Airbus actually tried to sell off some parts of their aerostructure business in a very similar way that Boeing spun off Boeing Wichita to create Spirit Aerosystems back in 2005. Now, Airbus didn't find any buyers for them then, which I'm sure that they're quite happy about now since they backed away from that strategy. But in other parallels to Boeing, Airbus has also had to deal with quality control issues in their production lines, particularly in Hamburg, Germany, where they have been making nearly all of their Airbus A321neos. Of course, the difference is that Airbus didn't get any quality escapements like Boeing did with the MAX. Instead, those quality problems led to even longer delays. There are also some worries that Airbus have been slipping a little bit with complaints about problematic in-service support, particularly from airlines in the United States. And finally, some airlines have, quite comically actually, been complaining that Airbus are less willing to offer lower prices for big orders now than they used to be. Now, frankly, that's not really a surprise, given that their order books are completely full and that they're selling more planes than they're making. Of course, eventually those orders might start to slow down, especially if Airbus successfully increases their production rates. But to be perfectly honest, if I was selling something that was flying off the shelves quicker than I could make them, I wouldn't give out rebates either. But as far as the near future of the European company is concerned, the real jack in the box is the smaller Airbus A220. As the single-aisle demand continues to shift from the Airbus A320 to the bigger A321, Airbus will likely try and expand production of the current A220 lineup and eventually maybe even launch a stretched variant to fully replace the Airbus A320neo. And of course hit Boeing 737 MAX 8 when they do, as I talked about in a recent video. Now that might sound like an easy and logical progression, but let's think a little bit about what that involves in practice. Today, Airbus makes the A320neo family in France, Germany, China and the United States. The Airbus A220, on the other hand, is made only in Mirabel in Quebec, Canada and in the United States, in the same Alabama facility where the A320 is also assembled. So knowing that, how will Airbus actually expand the A220 production enough so that it will replace the Airbus A320? Well, I guess they could eventually convert some of their A320 assembly lines in Germany or France to start making A220s in Europe, but we will probably have to wait to see the answer to that question. It is clear, however, that this won't be an easy transition to do, especially since Airbus have spent decades adjusting their supply chain and assembly sites to the Airbus A320. Crucially though, the fact that Airbus already have an efficient modern jet like the A220 means that the next all-new jet will likely be a little bit bigger than that. Their next jet could coexist with the Airbus A220 and replace the A321neo when the orders for that one starts drying up, likely near the middle of the next decade. Now I know that the middle of next decade sounds far into the future, but if you think about it, it's not too far away at all, especially when you consider how long an aircraft development takes. So what will that aircraft be like then? Well, as it turns out, we recently got a glimpse of exactly the sort of airliner that Airbus has in mind, and it looks frankly awesome. But with that awesomeness also comes some quite serious challenges. Challenges that could actually end up impacting Airbus much more than any competition from Boeing could. And I will tell you all about that new plane and those challenges after this. So, what is this awesome looking thing, you might wonder? Well, this is my sleek new hover pen, courtesy of Novium, today's sponsor. Novium is a brand that creates unique, innovative, high-end products aiming to inspire curiosity and develop creativity, which is something that I personally always is in need of. Their hover pens are inspired by the vastness and weightlessness of space, and they seamlessly blend artistry with practicality. I actually have two of these pens, but my absolute favorite is this, the Interstellar edition, featuring a precise 23.5-degree angle as a nod to the Earth axial tilt. Now, when I'm scripting, I sometimes just find myself spinning this thing as I'm thinking about how to explain something that's really complicated, and writing with it is so smooth and satisfying. Anyway, the Interstellar edition comes in a range of colors, and you can even get the premium edition with a real meteorite shard embedded in it if you want a more stellar touch. In 2022, this pen actually received the Time Best Innovation Award, which doesn't surprise me at all just looking at it. Now, if you, like me, lean towards using rollerball pens, I would recommend their latest release, the Future Edition, since that comes with an interchangeable tip. But whatever you like, all of their pens exude a feel of quality and reliability, and their awesome design makes them a perfect gift for friends and family. Now, to get one of these beauties for yourself, use the link that is in here below, and remember to use the code Mentour for an awesome 10% discount with free shipping to most countries. Thank you, Novium. Now, let's continue. On the 15th of December last year, a French politician called Roland Lescure posted a really, on the face of it, boring tweet. Lescure is the French Minister Delegate for Industry, and the post that he made included 4 different images. Now, the first 3 were the kind of stuff that we usually see from politicians: meetings, speeches and group photos. But the 4th image was something much more interesting. It was a rendering, unfortunately at a very low resolution, of an aircraft that we haven't seen before. But when you look at it, this plane was clearly an Airbus and had the kind of livery that Airbus normally uses for showing their future, greener aircraft concepts like the ZEROe. And new, greener airliners was exactly what this politician's meeting was all about, which obviously then also included some people from Airbus. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that most people didn't even notice this tiny photo of a plane in this politician's tweet, so my props again goes to John Ostrauer and Will Gisborne in the Air Current who sniffed it out. You see, in the past few years, Airbus have been very keen to present themselves as a company that invests heavily in research and development. They have showcased many different projects looking at different areas like wings with flexible wing tips, more advanced composite wing constructions, and of course the ZEROe hydrogen project. Now, between them, all of these small projects add up to something that could become the next Airbus airliner, but aside from some interesting hydrogen aircraft renderings, we haven't really seen anything that realistically showed us what this next Airbus airliner would be like, until now. This lower resolution image might well show us the finished puzzle that all of those technological pieces has ended up creating. But the way and the venue where this image was revealed also tells us a few things about the sort of obstacles that Airbus will face if they want to turn this from a concept rendering into a real aircraft. Now, I'll get back to that a little bit later, but let's first have a closer look at this rendering and figure out what kind of aircraft design this is actually representing. First of all, how big is it? Is this just an enlarged turboprop to replace, let's say, a 100-seater jet? Well, actually it doesn't look like it, and we know that because of a feature that we have all talked about a lot lately on Boeing aircraft. If you look closely, this Airbus plane has a mid-cabin exit door with more windows behind them and then another door further back. We're obviously having to speculate a little bit here, but a door like that generally means that this aircraft has seats for more than 189 passengers, possibly even more than 200, unless it doesn't have overwing exits, which aren't really visible in this rendering. But I think it looks like there is at least one overwing exit here, and there's also a hint of markings on the wing to guide passengers out in an evacuation. This would mean either 4 or 5 emergency exits on each side of the aircraft, which would hint at something in the current A320 or Boeing 737 MAX size range. Again, such an aircraft size makes sense if we assume that Airbus sticks with the A220 well after ending the production of the Airbus A320 and 321neo. Because even when the A220 is lengthened, Airbus will still need a bigger plane to replace the Airbus A321. Obviously, the most prominent feature of this new aircraft design are those engines under the wings, or rather under and in front of the wings. And if you are a regular viewer of this channel, I'm sure you already recognize them. And if you're not, it's time to subscribe now. Go on. Yes, these engines clearly seem to represent the CFM RISE, which is an open fan engine design that should be ready for operational use at about the middle of next decade. And that obviously coincides with the service entry date of this Airbus concept. Another feature of this aircraft that is really subtle, at least from this angle, are the shape of the wings. There is a noticeable curve along the length, giving them a gull wing appearance, and this is likely to make it possible to fit those engines under the wing without their blades ending up cutting a trench in the ground underneath them. Because these CFM RISE engines will produce similar amounts of power as the current engines on the 737 or the Airbus A320 families, but the diameter of those open fan blades will be closer to that of a Boeing 777 engine. In fact, they likely won't be far off the diameter of the plane's own fuselage, which will definitely be a quite interesting look to see, but it also means a huge increase in bypass ratio and with that efficiency. But now you might ask, why put the engines under there? Why wouldn't it be better to just put them in the rear where previous open fan test aircraft have had them, like the MD-80 and the 727? Well, the answer here is probably that fitting the engines under the wings makes it possible for the whole aircraft structure to remain much lighter. Airbus could have gone with a high wing design instead, but that would have also increased the weight of the aircraft. This gull wing design will require some additional internal structure, but Airbus must have decided that this is the best overall compromise to enable this engine installation. And actually, some of you might remember that we have actually seen a RISE engine design under a gull wing before. This was during the original presentation of the CFM RISE engine, and you can definitely see a family resemblance between that low wing design and the new Airbus conceptual rendering that we can see here. But this new concept also have other features with clear Airbus lineage. As I said before, Airbus has been experimenting with designs featuring folding wingtips. However, these wingtips won't just fold when the plane is on the ground like on the Boeing 777X. Now, they will of course do that as well, and that in itself is a big deal because it allows the aircraft to still park at the same airport gates as the current A320s and 737s do, while still allowing a wing that is longer overall, giving it a very high aspect ratio. But Airbus has also tested a configuration where the wingtips are then unlocked in flight for load alleviation purposes, or locked at a 10-degree angle for better handling and stall characteristics during takeoff and landing. So why is that important? Well, I've made a video about the concept that Boeing is exploring in collaboration with NASA for an aircraft with transonic truss-braced wings, or TTBW, and with a prototype called the X66 Alpha. Boeing has actually already begun work on this prototype, which was originally an MD-90, and that plane will also have super long, very high aspect ratio wings. But in that case, the truss brace is there to support the structure of the thin, long wing and make it possible for it to support the loads. But from the look of this rendering, it looks like Airbus are hoping to skip the need for that elaborate brace, which comes with its own weight and drag penalties. Instead, it looks like they are going to try to solve the support issue with their super high aspect ratio wing with the help of those flexible wingtips. Now, according to the Air Current, Airbus has confirmed that this is an authentic picture of one of their concepts, but not a definitive one, which of course makes sense. In any case, the name that Airbus will use for its next all-new concept design is the Next Generation Single Aisle, or NGSA, but I'm just going to refer to it here as NAGSA. Now, there is a lot more to be said about this future concept, but the question remains, why would Airbus even bother with it? If competition from Boeing isn't enough to trigger the launch of an all-new Airbus plane, then why are they doing it? Well, the answer is actually quite simple: legislation. And here is where a little bit of that controversy and also that worry that I was talking about before comes creeping back into the story. So, Boeing is working on its own future concept in partnership with NASA, meaning that some US government funds are going into it through the NASA involvement. And if we go back to that tweet from the French minister, we will also find something similar there. Because the topic of that post was a contract between Airbus and the French government for funding towards the development of future carbon-free aircraft. Now, government funding for new aircraft designs is obviously quite a sensitive topic. Boeing and Airbus, and with them the United States and the European Union, have just come out of a really long and costly trade war involving what both sides saw as illegal subsidies.
This is the longest trade dispute in the history of WTO, so it's in our common interest to solve it.
This started in 2004 and didn't end until 2021, with both sides placing tariffs and hindering trade with each other as it was going on. Now, nobody wants to see that happen again, so what kind of money are we talking about this time? Well, Boeing's funding through NASA to develop its transonic truss brace wing prototype is $425 million, divided out over 7 years. And over in Europe, Airbus just signed a contract that will see them and other industry partners and startups receive 900 million euros, or around $970 million over 3 years. Now, this isn't actually an apples to apples comparison, since Airbus themselves aren't getting all of this money. Some of it is going towards development of sustainable aviation fuels, for example, and to be clear, this money is still only a small fraction of what it's needed to actually launch even a relatively conventional new aircraft. And crucially, a lot, actually probably most of this European money is not there to help Airbus design its next new airliner. European governments want to promote carbon-free aircraft, either running on hydrogen or battery electric power, if that technology becomes viable on smaller planes, and some of the funding is going straight there. France has already banned some short flights between destinations that have good, fast train links, and other European countries could soon introduce similar legislation. And that prospect and other initiatives and potential limitations is what Airbus is now regarding as its next challenge, and that's a much bigger challenge than any competition that Boeing could ever mount. The problem for Airbus is that the NAGSA might not be good enough, in this form at least for the Europeans, unless it's almost completely carbon neutral. But still, if you imagine that it's very likely that between the super efficient new engines and the revolutionary flexible high aspect ratio gullwing, this aircraft could be as much as 30% more efficient than the Airbus A321neo, which would be really revolutionary. Remember, the 737 MAX and the A320neo families are already 13 to 15% more efficient than the previous generation, and that is in itself regarded as a fantastic achievement. But as long as this aircraft is run on normal jet fuel, it obviously still won't be carbon neutral. Now, of course, it could likely run on sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF, which is nearly identical to regular jet fuel and can be made in carbon neutral ways. But wouldn't it be even cooler if Airbus is actually designing this NAGSA as a platform that would eventually transition to a different fuel like hydrogen? As I said before, the colors of the concept in the French minister's tweet are those that Airbus uses for its Zero-E hydrogen aircraft. This concept has passenger windows all the way back to the tail, but what if Airbus designs it so that the rear section, behind the mid-cabin exit doors, could be turned into space for hydrogen tanks, which is something that we have seen on previous Airbus Zero-E concepts. Now, to be perfectly clear, I am only speculating here, but Airbus have pledged that they will introduce a hydrogen-powered airliner in the 2030s. It is quite plausible that, even if Boeing isn't a direct threat to their plans, Airbus are right now designing something that will be a good basis for their aircraft designs that they will be making later on during this century. Something that they could even be scaling up to larger sizes if needed. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please also consider sending a super thanks if you think that I've earned it, or join my Patreon crew to hang out with me directly in our next Zoom hangout. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.